Hi, this is our first example from section 8.2. On Canvas, I have two examples. This is one, and then there's another one that follows. In Canvas, it's called Chapter 8.2 Examples, and these are ones I usually do in class. So I thought I'd go over these today. Okay, so from section 8.2, 8.2 has to do with the claim about a proportion or percentage, and then just kind of remember, this is our test statistic. We do it by hand. We don't have to do it by hand, but I did do it on the document. We can also get the test statistic with our calculator. All of these are located under stats test, and I will show you that as we go through it. The other thing I want to mention is these steps right here are the same thing as I wrote here that I discussed earlier in an earlier slide. So they're exactly the same. And we're going to go over either the p-value method or the critical value method. We may do both in this video. It seems we'll just see how much time we have. Okay, so if I start this one, it says in a study of 61,646 people includes several questions about office relationships. Of the respondents, 25.5 reported that bosses scream at their employees. At the 0.05 significance level, test the claim. Okay, so this is a claim right here, that more than a fourth of people say their bosses scream at them. Okay, so right there, that's my claim. I want to put that in symbolic form. So it's more than a fourth. A fourth is 0.25. So that's like my step one. We'll come back to the sample data up here later. Step two is write down what's true when this is false. The opposite of greater than 0.25 is less than or equal to. And then you determine our null alternative. Again, those are in earlier videos. You pick whichever one does not have the equal sign, and that's automatically the alternative hypothesis. And the equal is always a null. So right here we know it's a right tail test. I'm just going to kind of right here. We'll get back to that later. Okay. Step 4 we haven't really talked about before, but that's our significance level. That's probably what they call type 1 error, which is one thing we had to omit from this particular class as it switched to online. And then we want to find our test statistic. Basically up to step 5. You can either get this test statistic by hand, which is what I did there. Here's the formula. Or a much easier way is to get it from your calculator, which is what I'm going to show you next. Okay, so let me get my calculator up here. So I go to Stat, Test, and I want to go down to number 5, one prop z-test, whenever it's a claim about a percentage or proportion. Okay, let me talk about what we have on here. P0 is, think of this as H, kind of think of H0. It's always the number that goes along with the null hypothesis. That's that one. N is how many people we have all together, which is this. And then X is how many people out of this sample that say that their bosses yell at them. So the way we're going to find that, let me just kind of move this over here for a second, is I'm going to take 61,646 and I'm going to multiply. I'm going to find 25.5% of that. So I'm going to take this times 0.255. I did work that down here too. This is what it comes out to be. You want to put in as a whole number. So if it's 25.5% of this number, then that would be this amount of people. So that's what I'm putting for X. It has to be a whole number. Okay. Now, we have everything for those 3 steps. These last parts, this last part here, what I want to do, wait until it focuses. There we go. Okay. You always want to pick whatever your alternative has. It's a right tail test, so you want to pick, you want to go over to the right tailed and hit enter. Okay. Now we're going to go to calculate. And the first thing that shows up, well, other than the alternative hypothesis, the next thing that shows up is our test statistic, which again, I would encourage you to use your calculator instead of doing by hand. And then right below it is this p-value. Okay, so now we have, that's what our calculator gives us. So again, this is my test statistic, that's my p-value. So So let me go ahead in the p-value method. So I compare the p-value right here with the alpha. If the p-value is smaller than alpha, then you're going to reject the null. Here's my p-value. Here's alpha. It's definitely smaller, so I'm going to reject the null. Okay, so that's that method. If I go the other method, I have to figure out what type of test I have. It's a right tail test. So I'm going to draw a right tail test. Label this is alpha. That's a 0.05. So if that's 0.05, the area to the left has to be 0.95. So to find this critical value, I take inverse norm, area to the left, 0, 1, that's my mean, and this is my standard deviation because this is a standard normal curve. And I end up getting 1.645. Now, if this test statistic falls in this tail, which it does, like if you think about it, this is 0, this is 1.645, 2.87, my test statistic does fall in that region, then you're going to reject the null. And that's what it says here, reject the null if the test statistic is in the critical region. It's really hard to see, but that's what it says. So when it falls in your tail, you're going to reject the null. Okay, so let's kind of go back and look at this before we get to this last part here. Okay, so the claim was that more than 25% of all people say their bosses yell at them. According to my sample, it was more than 25%. But is that enough to conclude this? That's what we're looking at. Okay, so back here we rejected the null, which means we say, pretty much we reject this. So we assume this is true. So we're pretty much saying that 25.5% is enough to conclude that more than 25% of their bosses yell at them. Okay, so that's a little bit of logic behind it. You can also, for this part, if that's confusing, you can also fall back on this page right here to come up with the conclusion. Okay, so again, this is just like homework number 10. Similar, I should say.